When Samantha said in front of all the guests that I wouldn't last a single year on my own, that I was nothing without this family, something inside of me broke, but not in the way she expected. There were no tears. There was no shouting. There was only a cold clarity, like when ice cracks and you can see the dark water underneath. The guests were laughing. A few were recording on their phones, and I just smiled. That smile must have looked strange to them, because a few of them stopped laughing. I looked my daughter-in-law straight in the eye and said with a calmness I didn't even know I possessed, "Why wait a year? I'm leaving now." The silence that followed was so heavy I could feel it in my bones. I turned around, grabbed my purse from the cream-colored sofa, and walked toward the door without looking back. Every step sounded like a thunderclap in that room, full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. That night, as I packed my things in the room that had been mine for 3 years, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Michael, my son. When I read it, the air left my lungs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got to that moment, because every humiliation has a beginning, and mine started long before that party. 3 years ago, I was 62. My husband had died over 20 years earlier, when Michael was barely 11. I raised that boy alone, working whatever jobs I could, sacrificing my own dreams so he could go to college, so he could have what I never had. I had studied business administration. I'd worked at a major firm before Michael was born. But when I was widowed, I had to choose between my career and my son. I chose my son. I always would. Michael grew up, became a professional, successful. I was so proud. And then he met Samantha. She appeared in our lives like a storm disguised as a breeze. Pretty, elegant, with that way of speaking that makes people think you know more than you really do. At first, I found her charming. How foolish I was. Michael was dazzled. They were married 6 months after they met. The wedding was in a huge ballroom, with flowers that cost more than $10,000. Samantha insisted on every detail. I paid for part of that wedding with the savings I had put away. I thought I was investing in my son's happiness. After the wedding, Michael asked me to move in with them. "Mom, the house is huge. It doesn't make sense for you to live alone in that tiny apartment. Besides, Samantha and I want you to be close." That's what he told me, with that smile that always melted my heart. I agreed. I sold my apartment, that place where I had raised Michael, where every corner held a memory, and I moved into their new house, a modern build in an exclusive neighborhood, with a yard and a pool. My room was on the ground floor, far from the master bedroom. "So you can have your privacy, Eleanor," Samantha told me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have seen it then. I should have noticed how she called me by my first name and not Mom, how her hugs were stiff, how her compliments always had a sharp, hidden barb. "That's a lovely dress, Eleanor, so age-appropriate. Thanks for helping with the cleaning. It's good for you to stay active." Little things that dig in like splinters. The first few months were tolerable. I tried to help without being in the way. I cooked sometimes, kept my space tidy, went for walks so I wouldn't be in the middle of things. But Samantha had a way of making me feel like everything I did was wrong. If I cooked, she'd order takeout. "I don't want you to get tired, Eleanor." If I offered to clean, she'd hire a cleaning service. A woman your age shouldn't be scrubbing floors. Every gesture of help was rejected with a poisonous kindness. And Michael saw nothing, or didn't want to see. When I tried to talk to him, he always had an excuse. "Mom, Samantha is just worried about you. You're overreacting. She adores you." Little by little, I became smaller in that house, more invisible. I ate alone most of the time because they always had plans. I stayed in my room when they had guests, because Samantha said I needed to rest. The house was enormous, luxurious, full of expensive furniture and modern art, but I felt like an intruder in a museum. Then the party started. Samantha loved hosting events. Every month there was a reason. Birthdays, anniversaries, celebrating some achievement of Michael's at his job. The house would fill with young, elegant, loud people. I usually stayed in my room, but sometimes Samantha would insist I come down. "Eleanor, come say hello to our friends." And I would go down, put on my best ivory or dusty rose dress, try to smile, but I always felt the stares. The conversations that would stop when I entered. the muffled giggles. One time I heard one of Samantha's friends whisper, "Poor Michael, having to support his mother at this stage." Samantha laughed. She didn't say a word to defend me. That night I cried in my room, with the pillow against my mouth so no one would hear me. But the next day I got up, dried my tears, and carried on. Because that's what you do when you love your son. You endure. Michael's birthday party was different from the start. Samantha had been planning it for weeks, talking about the guest list, the catering, the decorations. She hired a professional event planner who turned our backyard into something out of a magazine. Hanging lights, tables with champagne-colored linens, floral arrangements that must have cost thousands of dollars. Everything perfect, everything flawless. Samantha was wearing an emerald green dress that fit as if it had been painted onto her body. I put on my pearl gray dress, the most elegant one I had. I did my makeup carefully, fixed my hair. I wanted to look good for my son. I wanted him to be proud of me. How naive I was to think that was possible in Samantha's house. The guests started arriving around 7 o'clock in the evening. Michael's friends, colleagues, important clients, Samantha's family. More than 50 people filled the yard with laughter and conversation. I stayed in the kitchen at first, helping the caterers organize the trays. One of the girls looked at me with pity. "Ma'am, you don't have to do this. We've got it." But I needed something to do with my hands. I needed to feel useful. When I went out to the yard, I looked for Michael. He was by the pool, surrounded by friends, laughing. I approached with a smile. "Happy birthday, my love." I hugged him. He returned the hug, but it was quick, distracted. "Thanks, Mom. Have you eaten anything?" I nodded, even though I hadn't had a bite. I didn't want to be a burden, not on his special day. Samantha was at the center of everything, moving between groups, touching arms, laughing that high, bright laugh that drew all eyes. She was the kind of woman who lights up a room when she enters, but also darkens it for everyone else. I tried to chat with some guests. An older couple, friends of Samantha's family, were polite to me. We talked about the weather, the food, about nothing important. But I noticed them looking over my shoulder, as if searching for an excuse to get away. After a few minutes, they excused themselves. I was left alone by a table, holding a glass of wine I didn't want to drink, feeling like a piece of furniture someone forgot to move. Then I heard my name. It was coming from the group where Samantha was, near the bar. I drifted closer without thinking, believing they were calling me. But they weren't. They were talking about me. Samantha had her phone in her hand, showing something to her friends. "It's unbelievable," she was saying with that sweet voice she used when she wanted to sound compassionate. "Michael is so good to her. He keeps her here, gives her everything, and she doesn't even appreciate how lucky she is." One of her friends, a thin woman with lip fillers, nodded. "It must be so hard for you, Samantha, having to share your space like that." Samantha sighed, and in that sigh was something that chilled my blood. It was fake, completely fake. "I just hope Michael realizes it someday. She can't take care of herself. Without us, without this family, she has nothing. Absolutely nothing." I stood paralyzed behind a group of people, unintentionally hidden. No one had seen me. Samantha continued, "I give her 6 months, maybe a year tops, if Michael ever actually lets her go. She has no savings, no career, no thing but this roof over her head. And we provide that roof." Her friends murmured words of support. One said, "You're a saint for putting up with her." Another added, "I couldn't do it. My house is my sacred space." And Samantha smiled. That smile I had seen 1,000 times but now fully understood. Well, someone has to take care of her. Even if I sometimes feel like I'm raising 2 people instead of just planning my family with Michael, the words hit me like fists. Each one was a lie wrapped in poison. I had savings, not a lot after helping to pay for the wedding and other expenses. But I had something. I had worked my whole life. I had raised a son on my own. I had built a life with my own 2 hands when the world left me widowed and vulnerable. And this woman, this girl who had only come into our lives 3 years ago, was reducing me to nothing in front of strangers. She was turning me into a convenient lie for her narrative. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over there and confront her in front of everyone. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fear of ruining Michael's party. Or maybe it was a wiser part of me that knew anything I said would be used against me. I walked away without a sound, moving to the other side of the yard where there were fewer people. I sat on a bench under a tree, trying to breathe, trying to process what I had just heard. My hands were shaking. I looked at the house, that enormous house where I lived but that had never been mine. I looked at the people laughing and drinking, oblivious to the pain unfolding in the dark corners of the party. And I looked at my son, my Michael, the boy I had raised, whom I had loved more than my own life, surrounded by friends who had probably heard the same lies about me. How long had Samantha been doing this? How many times had she painted this picture of me as a burden, as someone pathetic who couldn't survive without charity? The anger began to grow. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was cold, calculating, like ice spreading through my veins. I got up from the bench. I walked back toward the party with my head held high. If Samantha wanted to play this game, if she wanted to make me her favorite victim, then so be it. But she was about to find out that women from my generation didn't survive this long by being weak. We survived by being smart. I spent the next hour watching. Really watching. Not as the invisible mother-in-law trying not to be in the way, but as someone who had finally opened her eyes. I saw how Samantha touched every guest's arm when she spoke, how she tilted her head with false modesty when they paid her compliments. I saw how she controlled the flow of the party, directing conversations, moving people around like pieces on a chessboard. And I saw how, every time someone mentioned Michael, she made sure to be at the center of that story. We just closed a huge deal. We're thinking of buying a beach property. Our life is so blessed. Our. As if Michael were an extension of her and not his own person. Then it was time for the cake. A 3-tier cake decorated with gold details that must have cost over $500. Samantha called everyone to the center of the yard. The lights dimmed, and someone brought out the cake while we all sang Happy Birthday. Michael was beaming, surrounded by love and attention. Samantha was plastered to his side, her arm wound through his like a vine. When we finished singing, Michael blew out the candles. Everyone clapped, and then Samantha picked up a glass and lightly tapped it with a spoon. The tinkling sound made everyone quiet down. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced with that melodious voice she used for presentations. Everyone looked at her expectantly. She smiled, looking at Michael with adoration. 3 years ago, I met the man of my dreams. And not only did I gain a wonderful husband, but a family too. She paused dramatically. Some guests murmured sweet words. I was standing at the edge of the circle, half hidden behind other people. And part of that family, Samantha continued, and her gaze slid over to me, is Eleanor, Michael's mom. The way she said my name made something in my stomach twist. It didn't sound affectionate. It sounded like she was introducing a problem that needed to be discussed. Eleanor lives with us, she went on, and now several faces turned toward me. Some with curiosity, others with that uncomfortable pity people reserve for difficult situations. And it has been quite an experience. An adventure, I'd say. Nervous laughter. My heart started to beat faster. What was she doing? Michael was looking at her with a confused smile, not understanding where this was going. Samantha took a sip of her drink. But lately, I've been thinking, I've wondered what would happen if Eleanor had to fend for herself. You know, if she had to live alone, manage her own expenses, her own life. The yard had gone completely silent. I could feel my face burning, but I couldn't move. It was like being trapped in a nightmare where you scream, but no sound comes out. And honestly, Samantha said, and now her voice had that tone of fake concern that made her sound generous when she was being cruel, I doubt she could live on her own for more than a year. Maybe not even that. Some people looked down. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. But there was a group, Samantha's friends mostly, who smirked. One of them even took out her phone and started recording. I'm not saying it to be mean, my daughter-in-law continued. I'm just telling the truth. Eleanor has nothing without this family, without Michael, without us. She has no career, no real resources, no independence. It's just a reality. The silence that followed was brutal. I could hear the buzz of insects in the garden, the water in the pool shifting softly, the distant sound of traffic on the street. and I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Some with pity, others with secondhand embarrassment, some with morbid curiosity, waiting to see how the pathetic old woman who had just been publicly destroyed would react. Michael finally spoke up. "Samantha, honey, I don't think this is the time." But his voice was weak, without conviction. He wasn't defending me. He was trying to smooth over the situation without contradicting his wife. Samantha ignored him. "I'm just saying we should be honest about these things. There's no shame in needing help. Eleanor needs this family, and we've been here for her. That's love, right?" She looked around, seeking validation. Some people nodded slowly, others just stared into their drinks, and I just stood there, in my pearl gray dress, feeling as though I had been stripped naked in front of strangers. 3 years of small humiliations had culminated in this moment, and Samantha had orchestrated it perfectly, at my own son's party, in front of dozens of witnesses who would now have this image of me seared into their minds. The pathetic mother-in-law, the burden, the old woman who couldn't take care of herself. But then, something changed. Maybe it was hearing my own thoughts spoken in Samantha's words. Maybe it was seeing Michael do nothing, letting his wife publicly demolish me. Or maybe it was simply that something inside me got tired of shrinking. I got tired of making myself small. I got tired of apologizing for existing. I got tired of being invisible in my own life. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, out of the shadows where I had been hiding. People parted slightly, creating a path. I walked until I was standing in front of Samantha, just a few feet away. She looked at me in surprise, and for a second, I saw a flash of worry in her eyes. "Good. Let her worry." "You're right, Samantha," I said. My voice came out steady, clear, louder than it had sounded in months. "You're absolutely right." She blinked, confused. This wasn't what she expected. She probably expected tears, a scene, something she could use to paint me as hysterical. "I doubt I could live on my own for a year depending on this family," I continued. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Several phones were recording now. Perfect. Let them record this too. "Because this family," I said, and I looked around the yard at all those curious faces, "is not my family. Not anymore." I looked at Michael. My son, my baby, the boy I had held in my arms, whom I had comforted through nightmares, whom I had raised to be a good man. He was staring at me with his mouth slightly open, not understanding. "Why wait a year?" I asked, and now I smiled. It wasn't a sad or bitter smile. It was a calm smile, filled with a cold clarity I didn't even know I possessed. "I'm leaving now." The entire yard seemed to hold its breath. Samantha let out a nervous laugh. "Eleanor, don't be dramatic. You're misunderstanding." I didn't interrupt her. My voice remained calm, but there was steel in it. "I understand perfectly. And you're right about one thing. It's time for me to find out who I am without you. Thank you for the clarity." I turned around. I didn't run. I didn't flee. I walked with my back straight, my head high, each step measured and deliberate. I could feel the stairs burning into my back. I heard murmurs, the sound of someone saying my name, but I didn't stop. I entered the house through the kitchen door. The caterers moved aside, their faces showing shock and something that might have been respect. I went to my room and closed the door. Only then did my hands start to shake. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the room that had been my world for 3 years. The cream-colored walls, the closet where my modest clothes hung, the small dresser with the photos of Michael when he was a little boy. Photos I had framed, that I had cherished. Memories of a time when he was mine, when I was enough for him. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was strangely clear, as if a fog that had been covering me for years had finally lifted. I could hear the party continuing outside, quieter now, the laughter forced, the music. Life went on for all of them. But for me, something had ended, and something else was about to begin. I stood up and pulled my suitcase from the closet. It was old, bought over 15 years ago, but it was still functional. I began to pack methodically. Underwear, blouses, pants, the 2 good dresses I had, my comfortable shoes, my toiletries. I didn't have much. I'd never had much, but what I had was mine, earned with my work, with my effort. As I was folding a peach-colored blouse, I heard footsteps in the hall. Someone knocked softly on the door. Mom. It was Michael. Of course it was Michael. My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. For a moment, I considered not opening it, considered leaving him out there, wondering, feeling even a fraction of the abandonment I had felt all night. But I couldn't. He was still my son. He still carried my blood. I opened the door. He was standing there in his wrinkled white shirt, his hair disheveled, his eyes worried. Mom, please, don't do this. Don't do this. As if I were the one creating the problem. As if I were the one who had publicly humiliated someone. What exactly shouldn't I be doing, Michael? I asked. My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. He walked into the room without an invitation, saw the open suitcase on the bed. Panic crossed his face. You can't just leave like this. Samantha didn't mean it like that. She was just... You know how she is. Sometimes she speaks without thinking. She speaks without thinking, I repeated. The words sounded hollow. Michael, she spent weeks planning that party. Every detail was perfect. Do you really believe what she said was an accident? He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Okay, so maybe she crossed a line. But Mom, you're overreacting too. Leaving like this, making a scene. I made a scene? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my throat. Your wife tore me to shreds in front of 50 people. She said I can't survive on my own, that I have nothing, that I'm a burden on you. And when I leave with dignity, I'm the one making a scene? Michael looked at the floor. He had no answer for that. Or maybe he did, but he didn't want to say it. Why didn't you defend me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. I had wanted to sound strong, but my voice broke on the last word. Why did you just stand there while she destroyed me? I didn't know what to do, he said finally. His voice was small, like when he was a child and had broken something valuable. It happened so fast, and I didn't want to make things worse. You didn't want to make things worse, I whispered. I kept packing. I took the photos from the dresser, wrapped them in a soft blouse. Michael watched me, helpless. Mom, please stay. I'll talk to Samantha. She'll apologize. Everything will go back to normal. That's just it, Michael. I don't want everything to go back to normal. Because normal was me making myself invisible in my own life. Normal was your wife poisoning every day with little cruelties. Normal was you not seeing any of it, because it's easier not to see. I closed the suitcase. It wasn't much that I was taking. 3 years of my life reduced to one suitcase and a box with my books. Where are you going to go? Michael asked. There was something in his voice now, something that sounded like genuine concern, maybe even guilt. I have savings, I said. Not much, but I had them. I had been careful, even when I helped pay for his wedding, even when I contributed to the expenses of the house that was never really my house. I'll find a place. I'll be fine. Mom. He started, but I held up my hand. No, not tonight, Michael. Tonight I need to leave. I need to be alone and think. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find the boy I had raised in this man who had stayed silent while I was humiliated. I love you. I will always love you. But I can't stay here. I grabbed my suitcase and my purse. Michael didn't try to stop me physically, but he followed me down the hall, down the stairs, to the front door. The party was still going on in the yard, though quieter now. Everyone was probably gossiping about what had happened, creating their own versions of the story. It didn't matter. I walked out to the street and called an Uber on my phone. Michael stood in the doorway watching me go. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later. I knew that. But in that moment, I just felt a strange numbness, as if I were watching everything from outside my own body. The car arrived in 10 minutes. I gave the driver the address of a modest hotel I knew, not far from there. As we drove away, I saw the illuminated house in the rearview mirror. It looked beautiful from the outside, like a perfect postcard of success and happiness. No one passing by would know about the poison that lived between those walls. The hotel was simple, but clean. I paid for 1 week, using my credit card that had a low limit, but it was mine. The room was small, with a double bed and an old desk. Nothing compared to the house I had just left. But it was mine. Every inch of that space was mine. I sat on the bed and finally let out the breath I had been holding. And then my phone vibrated. It was a text from Michael. My heart leaped, hoping for maybe an apology, a promise that things would change. I opened the message. It was 3 long paragraphs. I started to read. "Mom, I need to be honest with you. Samantha and I have been talking for months about making some changes. With the baby we're planning on having, we're going to need that space you're using. And financially, we just can't keep carrying extra expenses. Samantha is right, that you need to learn to be more independent. I already spoke to the lawyer and had you removed from the will and the house deeds. It was something we should have done a while ago. I don't want you to think this is about tonight. It's just that we need to focus on our future as a couple. I hope you understand. You'll always be my mom, but I have my own family now." I read the message 3 times. Every word was a knife. The baby they were planning, the changes they had been discussing for months, removed me from the will, from the house deeds. It was all already planned. Tonight's humiliation hadn't been an impulse. It had been the final push to get me out of their lives permanently. And Michael had allowed it. No, more than that, Michael had actively participated. He had gone to a lawyer. He had signed papers. He had erased my name from his future. My son, the boy I had raised alone, who had been my reason for living for 25 years, had just eliminated me from his life with a text message. The phone fell from my hands onto the bed. I stared at the white hotel wall, not really seeing anything. And then, for the first time all night, I cried. I cried for the son I had lost. I cried for the years I had sacrificed. I cried for the woman who had been foolish enough to think that unconditional love was enough. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat ached and my eyes were swollen. I cried until the sobs turned into anger, and that anger, cold and brilliant as a diamond, turned into something else. It turned into determination, into clarity, into power. If they wanted to see me fall, if they expected me to crumble, to beg them to let me come back, then they were in for a surprise. Because Eleanor Thompson had died tonight in that backyard, and the woman being born in this cheap hotel room was someone else entirely. She was someone who had forgotten just how strong she could be. I woke up the next day with swollen eyes and a dry throat, but with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sunlight streamed through the hotel window, illuminating the simple room that was now my temporary home. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was 65 years old, wrinkles around her eyes, graying hair that I had always been ashamed of. But there was something different in that gaze. There was fire. I washed my face, combed my hair, and put on clean clothes. Then I took out my old laptop, the one I'd bought years ago and barely used because Samantha always commented on how outdated it was. I powered it on and started making a list. Not an emotional list of complaints or regrets. A practical, strategic list of resources and possibilities. First, my savings. I had approximately $23,000 in my bank account. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't nothing, either. It was the result of years of being careful, of not spending on nonsense, of saving every penny I could. With that, I could rent a small apartment for several months while I figured out what to do. Second, my education. A bachelor's in business administration, completed over 30 years ago. Experience working at a consulting firm before Michael was born. I had left all that to raise my son, but the knowledge was still there, tucked away somewhere in my brain. Third, my contacts. Decades had passed, but maybe some people still remembered me. It was worth a try. I opened my email, that old account I almost never used, and there, among the spam and notifications, I found something that made me pause. An email from 2 months ago from Arthur Vance. Arthur had been my late husband's business partner, a man who had known our family since before Michael was born. After my husband died, Arthur had offered me a job at his company, but I had refused because Michael was so young. We kept in sporadic contact for years, until I moved in with Michael and Samantha and lost track of many people. The email read, "Eleanor, I hope you are well. I've been thinking of you lately. If you'd ever like to grab a coffee and catch up, I'd love to see you. I've always admired your mind for business. All the best, Arthur. I stared at that email for a long time. 2 months. It had arrived 2 months ago, and I had never seen it because I'd stopped checking my email regularly. Samantha always said I didn't need to be glued to technology, that I should enjoy my retirement. Retirement, as if I had chosen to retire, as if I didn't have decades of productive life still ahead of me. With slightly trembling hands, I replied to the email. Arthur, thank you for thinking of me. I would love to get that coffee. Are you free this week? I have a lot to tell you, Eleanor. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I searched my phone for another contact. Julia Hayes. We had been friends years ago, before I shut myself away in Michael and Samantha's house. Julia was a lawyer, specializing in family law. We had met in a support group for widows, both of us trying to rebuild our lives after losing our husbands. She had moved on, building a successful career. I had stayed stuck, focused solely on Michael. I sent her a text message. Julia, it's Eleanor. I know it's been a long time. Could we talk? I need legal advice, and also a friend. The reply came in less than 5 minutes. Eleanor, of course. Come to my office today if you can. I'll send the address. So good to hear from you. I changed into more formal clothes, a set of ivory-colored pants, and a blouse that made me look professional. I put on a little makeup, not to hide who I was, but to look presentable. I took a taxi to the address Julia had sent. Her office was in a modern building downtown. The waiting room was elegant but welcoming, with green plants and contemporary art on the walls. When Julia came out to greet me, I almost didn't recognize her. She had aged, as I had, but she wore her age with a confidence I had forgotten was possible. Short silver hair, a dark gray pantsuit, a wide smile. Eleanor, she said, hugging me. And in that hug, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Acceptance without judgment. In her private office, with hot coffee between us, I told her everything. The move with Michael and Samantha. The small humiliations. The party. The text from Michael about removing me from the will. Julia listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Eleanor, I am so sorry you went through this. But legally, there are a few things you should know. She explained that if I had contributed financially to the purchase of the house or to improvements, I might have some rights. That if Michael had promised to care for me in exchange for me selling my apartment, that could be considered. But she was also honest. Legal battles were long, expensive, and emotionally devastating. You could fight, she said, and you might even win something, but it would cost you years of your life, and probably all of your peace of mind. I don't want to fight, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I don't want anything from them. What I want is to build something of my own, something so big that when they see me, they regret ever underestimating me. Julia smiled. It was a fierce, warrior's smile. I like that much better. In that case, let's talk strategy. We spent the next 2 hours discussing options. Julia told me about programs for entrepreneurs over 60, about community resources, about networking. She told me about women she knew who had reinvented their lives in their 60s and 70s. Age is an advantage if you know how to use it, she said. You have experience, maturity, resilience, and you have something many young people don't. Nothing to lose. The next day, Arthur replied to my email. We met at a small coffee shop near his office. When I walked in, he was already there, waiting. Arthur was 70, with completely white hair, but the same kind eyes I remembered. He stood up when he saw me and gave me a hug. Eleanor, how long has it been? We sat down and ordered coffee. He asked about Michael, and I felt the urge to lie, to say everything was fine. But I was tired of lying. I told him the truth. Not all of it, not the most painful details, but enough. He listened with a serious expression. That boy is a fool, he said finally. His father would be ashamed. The words hit me with an unexpected force. It was true. My husband had been a good, hard-working man who valued loyalty and respect. If he could see what Michael had done. But I don't want to talk about Michael, I said, straightening my back. I want to talk about me. Arthur, I need a job. I need a chance to prove I still have value. He looked at me intently. Eleanor, you have always had value. Your husband used to talk constantly about your vision for business. He said you were a better analyst than half our team. He grew thoughtful for a moment, sipping his coffee. I have a proposal. I'm starting a new division in my company. Specialized consulting for businesses that want to reach the senior market. It's a sector that's growing exponentially, but most companies don't know how to talk to that audience. I need someone who understands that demographic from the inside. Someone smart, with life experience, who can develop authentic strategies. My heart began to pound. A job. I'm offering you a partnership, he corrected. Not as an employee, as an independent consultant. You would develop your own methodology, your own programs. I would give you access to my network of clients and resources. We'd split the profits. It would be your own business, but with the backing of my infrastructure while you build it. I couldn't believe it. Yesterday I was crying in a hotel room. Today someone was offering me the chance to rebuild my professional life. Why? I asked. I needed to know. Why would you do this for me? Arthur smiled. Because I owe it to your husband. Because I believe in you. And because honestly, I think you are going to make this division extremely successful. This isn't charity, Eleanor. It's business. You have something I need. Authentic knowledge and a passion to prove your worth. He extended his hand. What do you say? Ready to get back in the game? I looked at his outstretched hand. I thought of Samantha saying I wouldn't last a year on my own. I thought of Michael erasing me from his life with a text. I thought of all those years of making myself small, invisible, insignificant, and then I shook Arthur's hand firmly. Ready, I said. And for the first time in years, I really was. The first 3 months were brutal, not because the work was hard, but because I had to relearn who I was without the identity of the selfless mother, without the role of the invisible mother-in-law. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it had big windows that let in the sunlight and a balcony where I could have coffee in the mornings. It was mine. Every piece of furniture I bought, every plate, every towel, was my choice. For the first time in decades, no one was telling me my taste was outdated or inappropriate. I bought a used but solid desk, an ergonomic chair, and turned the corner of my living room into an office. This was where my new future would be born. Arthur kept his word. He connected me with my first client the second week, a chain of gyms that wanted to attract adults over 55 but didn't know how without sounding condescending. I sat down with their marketing directors, all in their 20s with prestigious degrees and zero understanding of their target audience. They looked at me with that mix of curiosity and skepticism reserved for older people in the corporate world. Eleanor, one of them started, a guy with thick glasses and a carefully scruffy beard. We appreciate you being here, but our brand is very modern. We don't want to alienate our younger audience. I smiled. It was the same smile I had used on Samantha that night in the yard. Calm, full of knowledge they didn't possess. Let me explain something to you, I said, opening my laptop where I had prepared a presentation. The over 55 market controls over 70% of the disposable income in this country. They have paid-off houses, substantial savings, and free time, but you're ignoring them because you assume they aren't cool. You know what isn't cool? Leaving money on the table because of generational bias. I showed them statistics, case studies, financial projections. I spoke for 45 minutes about demographics, consumer behavior, and strategies for inclusion without condescension. When I finished, the guy with the glasses was no longer looking at me with skepticism. He was looking at me like he had just struck gold. When can you start? He asked. I already have, I replied. I walked out of that meeting with a $25,000 contract to develop their entire strategy. With that first success, other clients started to come. A tech company that wanted to simplify its products for older users. A travel agency specializing in senior tourism. A pharmaceutical company that needed clearer communication. Every project taught me something new and gave me back a piece of the woman I had been before I got lost in motherhood. It wasn't that I regretted raising Michael, but I regretted disappearing in the process. I worked 12-hour days, not because I had to, but because I loved it. Every presentation, Every analysis, every strategy was a declaration. I am still here. I still matter. I can still build things. Julia became my confidant and unofficial advisor. We met every 2 weeks for dinner, and she helped me navigate the legal world of contracts and business. You need to formalize this, she told me one night over cheap pasta and wine. Create an LLC. Protect your assets. This isn't a hobby anymore, Eleanor. This is a real business. She was right. With her help, I established my own company, Silver Strategies Consulting. The name was deliberate. Silver for the gray hair, for the wisdom that comes with years. I wasn't hiding from my age. I was branding it. I designed a simple but elegant logo. I created a basic website. And I started building a presence on social media, something I'd never done because Samantha always said older people looked ridiculous on Instagram. But it turned out there was a huge market of women my age who were sick of being invisible. I started posting about reinvention after 60, about starting businesses in your senior years, about not letting others define your worth. My first posts got 5 or 10 likes, then 50, then hundreds. Women would write me private messages, sharing their own stories of humiliation, of being dismissed, of waking up one day and realizing they had disappeared. And I answered every single one. It's not too late. It is never too late. I am 65, and I am just getting started. My words resonated because they were true. I wasn't selling a fantasy. I was living proof. 6 months in, my business was generating more money than I had earned in my entire previous life. I wasn't a millionaire, but I was comfortable. More than comfortable. I was able to move into a better apartment, in a building with security and a gym. I bought new clothes, not because the old ones were bad, but because I wanted to. Brightly colored dresses that Samantha would have said were inappropriate for my age. Elegant coats that made me feel powerful when I walked down the street. I cut my hair in a modern style that framed my face. I wasn't trying to look younger. I was trying to look like me. Strong, capable, present. People began to notice me in different ways. In business meetings, they no longer treated me like a lost grandmother. They treated me like an expert. Arthur was thrilled. Eleanor, we need to expand this. You're generating more business than you can handle alone. He was right. Consulting requests were coming in faster than I could process them, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired help. First, a virtual assistant, a 58-year-old woman who had been laid off from her corporate job and needed a fresh start. Then a 62-year-old graphic designer who had lost her husband and was looking for purpose. I built a team of women the world had discarded, and together we proved that world wrong. We proudly called ourselves the Silver Circle. And our work was exceptional. The media started to notice. First, it was a small article in a local paper about senior entrepreneurs. Then an interview in a business magazine. Then I was invited onto a popular podcast about professional reinvention. Every appearance brought more clients, more recognition, more validation that what I was building mattered. On one of those podcasts, the interviewer asked what had inspired me to start. I could have given a safe answer about always wanting to be an entrepreneur, but I decided to be honest. I was inspired by humiliation, I said. I was inspired by someone telling me I was worthless without them. I was inspired by discovering I had been wrong about myself for years. The episode went viral. Thousands of people shared it. The comments were filled with women saying, "Me too," and "This is me," and I needed to hear this. 8 months after I walked out of Michael's house, my company had billed over $200,000. I was personally earning more in a month than I had in a year when I worked before Michael was born. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the sense of purpose. It was waking up every day knowing that what I did mattered, that I was helping other people, that I was building something no one could take away from me. I opened a new savings account and started filling it aggressively. Not because I was afraid of being left with nothing again, but because I wanted options. I wanted to be able to say no. I wanted the power to choose. During all this time, Michael tried to contact me several times. Text messages that I read but didn't answer. "Mom, how are you? Mom, we need to talk. Samantha wants to apologize." Each message was a test of my resolve. Part of me, that part that had been a mother for so many years, wanted to answer, wanted to forgive and forget. But a newer, stronger part knew that responding would be a step backward, not out of anger, but out of peace. I decided that when I was ready to talk to Michael, it would be on my terms. When I was so undeniably successful that he couldn't help but see what he had lost. When my absence had taught the lesson my presence never could. I blocked his number temporarily. Not forever, but for now. I needed this time for myself, without the distraction of his guilt or his attempts to fix what he had broken. And I kept building. Every day was another brick in the building of my new life. Some days were hard. Some days I sat on my balcony and cried for the son I had lost, for the years I couldn't get back. But those days became less frequent. And in their place, something more solid grew. Certainty. The certainty that I had done the right thing, that I deserved more than I had accepted, that my story hadn't ended that night in the garden. It was just beginning. It was Julia who showed me the video first. We were having lunch at a restaurant near her office when she pulled out her phone with a strange expression. "Eleanor, you need to see this. It's going viral." She passed me the phone, and there it was, the video from that night in the yard. Someone had uploaded it to social media, but not in the way Samantha had planned. The title read, "Cruel Daughter-in-Law Humiliates Mother. In-Law at Family Party. Watch what happens next." It had over 2 million views. My stomach clenched as I watched it. There was Samantha in her emerald green dress, saying all those horrible things about me. The camera perfectly captured her cruel smile, the way she looked for validation from her friends. And then it captured me, stepping out of the shadows, my voice calm but firm. "Why wait a year? I'm leaving now." The comments were devastating for Samantha. What a venomous woman. The mother-in-law has more class in her little finger than this girl has in her whole body. "Updates, please. I need to know the grandma is okay." Thousands and thousands of comments defending me, attacking Samantha, sharing their own stories of family abuse. The video had clearly struck a nerve. It wasn't just about me. It was about all the older women who had been dismissed, belittled, made invisible, and people were furious. "I didn't know anyone had uploaded it," I said, handing the phone back to Julia with trembling hands. She nodded. It was one of the guests. Apparently, she felt so uncomfortable with what Samantha did that she decided to expose her. And it worked. In the following days, the video reached more platforms: TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Influencers shared it with their own commentary. Journalists began writing articles about ageism and emotional family abuse, using my story as an example. And then they started to find more. Former housekeepers who had worked for Samantha and Michael began to speak out. One of them, a woman named Maria, gave an interview to a popular blog. She talked about how Samantha treated her, yelling at her for minimal mistakes, withholding pay, making her work overtime without compensation. And the way she treated her husband's mom was worse, Maria said in the interview. "Mrs. Thompson was so kind, she always treated us with respect. But Samantha humiliated her constantly. She forbade her from entering certain parts of the house. She'd serve her leftovers while they ate fresh food. It was abuse." More women came forward with similar stories. A nanny Samantha had fired without notice. A florist Samantha had publicly accused of ruining an event when the mistake had been Samantha's. A pattern was emerging. Samantha was cruel to anyone she perceived as inferior or powerless to fight back. The brands Samantha worked with as an influencer began to distance themselves. She had a small YouTube channel about luxury lifestyles and a few minor brand deals. One by one, those contracts were canceled. The companies issued statements saying their values did not align with abusive behavior. Samantha's YouTube channel lost thousands of subscribers in days. Her Instagram posts, which used to get thousands of likes, were now flooded with hundreds of negative comments. Abuser. Fake. Karma. I watched all of this from a distance, with complicated feelings. Part of me felt a dark satisfaction watching her world crumble. It was the justice I hadn't sought, but that the universe was delivering anyway. But another part of me, the part that was still a mother, worried about Michael. Because if Samantha was falling, he would fall with her. And then I got a text from an unknown number. It was Chris, Michael's best friend from college. Mrs. Thompson, I need to talk to you. It's about Michael, please. I hesitated, but finally agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop. Chris arrived, looking tired, nervous. He sat across from me and sighed deeply. Thanks for coming. I know the family has treated you terribly. What's wrong with Michael? I asked, getting straight to the point. Chris stared at his coffee. He's a wreck. The video, the public exposure, it's all affecting his job. His clients are questioning him. But that's not the worst part. He paused. He found out Samantha has been lying to him about a lot of things. Finances, mainly. She spent over $60,000 in the last 6 months on things she hid: clothes, beauty treatments, even a sports car she bought in her sister's name but that she drives. Michael thought they were saving for the baby they were supposedly trying to have. But it turns out Samantha never wanted kids. It was just another lie to keep him under control. The cold anger I had felt that night returned. She hadn't just taken my son from me. She had been manipulating him all this time. There's more, Chris continued. Michael found texts between Samantha and her friends. Texts from over a year ago where she was making fun of him. She said he was boring but useful because he had a good income and a house. That she was just with him until she found something better. It was all planned, Mrs. Thompson. From the beginning, she was just using him. I closed my eyes. My poor, foolish son. He had chosen that woman over his mother, and now he was discovering she had never even loved him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Chris looked at me directly. Because he wants to talk to you, but he's too ashamed. Because he needs his mother, even if he doesn't know how to ask. And because you deserve to know that he finally understands what he lost. I didn't answer right away. I drank my coffee, processing the information. Michael had made choices. He had chosen to believe Samantha. He had allowed my humiliation. He had erased me from his life with a text. The consequences of those choices were his to bear. Tell Michael, I said finally, that when he's ready to talk, I'll be ready to listen. But not because I need him to, because he might need to. Chris nodded, understanding. That's fair. More than fair. He got up to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, all his real friends thought what they did to you was horrible, and we're all proud to see what you've built. Your story has inspired a lot of people. After he left, I stayed in the coffee shop, thinking. The viral video, Samantha's downfall, I hadn't planned any of it. I hadn't sought public revenge. I had chosen the harder path, to build something so solid that my absence would speak for itself. And now, the world was doing the rest. But I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. I felt something more complex. I felt grief for the lost time. I felt sadness for my son, who had learned such painful lessons. But I also felt peace. Peace because I knew that no matter what happened with Michael, I would be okay. I no longer needed his validation to know my worth. That night, as I was working on a proposal for a new client, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mom, it was Michael. His voice sounded broken, small, like when he was a child and had a nightmare. I said nothing, waiting. Mom, I'm sorry. I am so sorry for everything. You were right about Samantha. You were right about everything. I was an idiot. I was a terrible son, and I understand if you never forgive me, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but my voice came out firm. Michael, I appreciate your apology, but I can't have this conversation right now. I need time. I've built a new life, and I need to protect my peace. When I'm ready, I will let you know. I understand, he said, his voice cracking. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I saw your company. I read about your success. You're amazing, Mom. You always were, and I was too blind to see it. Goodbye, Michael, I said softly. I hung up before he could answer. I sat in my home office, in the apartment I had built with my own money, surrounded by the evidence of my success. And I cried. I cried for what had been. I cried for what could have been, but I also smiled, because I had survived. Not just survived, I had flourished, and that no one could take away from me. 3 weeks after Michael's call, I received an invitation that would change everything. The city's Chamber of Commerce was organizing its annual Entrepreneurship Summit, a prestigious event where business leaders shared their success stories, and they had selected me as one of the keynote speakers. The topic of my talk: Reinvention After 60. It's never too late to start. When I read the invitation, my hands trembled. Speaking in front of 300 people in a corporate auditorium, being on a stage under bright lights, sharing my story with strangers who would judge me, analyze me, measure me. The old Eleanor would have declined immediately. She would have said she wasn't qualified, that someone else deserved the honor. But I wasn't the old Eleanor anymore. I accepted the invitation. I spent 2 weeks preparing my presentation. Not just the business technicalities, but the emotional story behind it. Julia helped me rehearse, sitting in my living room as I practiced over and over. "You need to mention the humiliation," she told me during one rehearsal. "It's the most powerful part. It's what makes your story real." I had been avoiding that detail, not wanting to seem victimized or bitter. But she was right. The humiliation was the catalyst. Without it, there would have been no transformation. "You don't have to name names," Julia continued. "But people need to understand where you came from to appreciate how far you've come." So I rewrote entire sections, adding the raw truth of that yard, of that text message, of that night in the cheap hotel, crying myself to sleep. The day of the event arrived, overcast and cool. I put on a wine-colored pantsuit I had bought specifically for the occasion, elegant but powerful. I did my makeup carefully, not to hide my age but to highlight it. I wanted every wrinkle to be seen. They were maps of survival, battle scars. I arrived at the convention center an hour early. The auditorium was enormous, with rows and rows of seats rising toward the ceiling. The stage had a giant screen and professional lighting. My stomach churned with nerves, but I took a deep breath. I had survived worse than a stage. Arthur arrived to support me, along with my small team from the Silver Circle. "You're going to be incredible," my assistant said, squeezing my hand. People began to fill the auditorium. Executives in expensive suits, young entrepreneurs with laptops, students taking notes. I was scheduled to speak after lunch, the prime spot when people are alert but relaxed. As I waited backstage, I checked my phone nervously. And then I saw it. A text from Chris. "Mrs. Thompson, Michael is here. In the auditorium, row 12. Just wanted you to know." Samantha tried to come with him, but he told her no. They're officially separated. Good luck. My heart stopped. Michael was here. My son had come to watch me speak. I didn't know whether to feel happy or terrified. I decided not to think about it. I had a job to do. The host called me to the stage. The applause was polite, professional. I walked to the podium, back straight, head high. The lights were blinding, making it impossible to see individual faces in the audience. Better that way. I took a deep breath and began. 11 months ago, I was 65 years old, and I had nothing. No job, no income of my own, no sense of identity outside of being someone's mother. I was living in my son's house as an unwanted guest, making myself smaller every day, believing that was all I deserved. The auditorium went completely silent. And then, at a family party, someone told me that I wouldn't last a year living on my own, that I was nothing without that family. And something inside of me broke. Or maybe it fixed itself. It's hard to tell. I told the story. Not with self-pity, but with brutal honesty. The humiliation, the decision to leave, the devastating text from Michael. I heard gasps in the audience, murmurs of sympathy. But I didn't stop there. I told them about the hotel, about calling Arthur, about building Silver Strategies Consulting from scratch. I shared real numbers. My first $25,000, then $50,000, then $100,000. I showed before and after photos. Me in that hotel room with a single suitcase. Me now, in my modern office with my team. "Age makes us invisible in this society," I said, my voice growing stronger, especially women. "We are told our value ends when we stop being young, when we stop being conventionally attractive, when we stop being useful to others. But that is a lie. I am 66 years old. I have wrinkles. I have gray hair. I have knees that ache when it rains. And I also have a company that generates over $300,000 annually. I have clients who respect me. I have a team that trusts me. I have a life that I built with these hands that someone said were not capable of holding anything. The audience erupted in applause. Not the polite applause from the beginning. Real, loud applause, with people getting to their feet. I saw movement in row 12. Someone standing up. And though the lights made it hard to see clearly, I knew it was Michael. He was on his feet, clapping, and in the distance I could see he was crying. My voice broke slightly, but I continued. So for anyone here who thinks it's too late, for anyone who has been dismissed, underestimated, made invisible, it is not. You are not too old, too tired, too late. You are exactly what the world needs. Experience, resilience, wisdom. Use it. When I finished, the ovation was deafening. People of all ages on their feet, applauding. I saw tears on many faces. The host had to wait almost 2 minutes before the noise died down enough to speak. Eleanor, that was extraordinary. Do you have time for a few questions from the audience? I nodded. Hands shot up immediately. A young woman asked about specific marketing strategies. An older man asked about overcoming fear. And then someone in row 12 raised their hand. The host passed him a microphone. Michael's voice, amplified throughout the auditorium, asked, "Is there room for forgiveness in your story of reinvention? Or are some wounds just too deep?" The auditorium fell silent. It wasn't the kind of business question they were expecting. It was personal, raw, obviously loaded with meaning. I looked toward where Michael stood, my eyes finally adjusting to the lights. I could see him clearly now. My son, thinner than before, with dark circles under his eyes, but looking at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine respect. "That's a complicated question," I said slowly, choosing my words with care. "I believe forgiveness isn't something you owe to other people. It's something you give yourself so you can move on. I have forgiven the people who hurt me not because they deserve it, but because carrying that anger was hurting me." I paused. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting the same people hurt you in the same way again. It means setting boundaries, protecting your peace, and rebuilding trust slowly, if it's rebuilt at all. Michael lowered the microphone, nodding. I could see he understood. He understood that the door wasn't closed forever, but it wasn't wide open either. I answered a few more questions before the event continued. When I walked off the stage, I was surrounded by people wanting to talk to me, to exchange business cards, to share their own stories. But my eyes kept searching the crowd for Michael. Finally, I saw him, waiting at the edge of the group, not forcing his way in, just waiting patiently. When the crowd finally thinned, he approached. We looked at each other for a long moment without saying anything. And then he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so proud of you, Mom, and so ashamed of myself." "I know," I said simply. "Michael, you need to understand that I can't go back to being who I was. That woman died that night in your yard. This version of me has boundaries. She has expectations. She has self-worth that isn't dependent on being your mother." "I understand," he said quickly. "And I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to pretend nothing happened. I'm just asking for a chance to get to know this new version of you, to rebuild something, even if it's different." I looked at him. "My son, my greatest love and my greatest sorrow. We can try," I said finally, slowly, "coffee once a month, to start. No promises, no expectations. Just two people learning to know each other again." Tears rolled freely down his face now. "Thank you, Mom. That's more than I deserve." "Yes," I agreed softly. "It is. Don't waste it." A year after that night in the garden, my life was unrecognizable. Silver Strategies Consulting had grown beyond my wildest dreams. It was no longer just me and a small team. I now had real offices in a corporate building downtown, with 12 full-time employees, all women over 50 who had been discarded by the traditional corporate world. We had expanded into 3 countries, Mexico, Colombia, and Spain. Contracts were coming in faster than we could process them. Fortune 500 companies wanted my expertise. Universities invited me to give lectures. My story had been featured in international business magazines, always with the same angle. the woman who turned humiliation into an empire. Money was no longer a concern. I had surpassed $1 million in annual revenue. I bought a beautiful apartment overlooking the city, the kind of place I used to look at in magazines, thinking it would never be for someone like me. I had art on the walls, elegant furniture I had chosen personally, a balcony where I drank coffee every morning watching the sunrise. But the best part wasn't the material things. It was the sense of solidity, of knowing that no one could take away what I had built, because I had built it myself with my intelligence, my hard work, my refusal to disappear. Every morning I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I liked, a strong woman, a woman who had survived and flourished. Michael and I had been seeing each other once a month, just as I'd promised. Awkward coffees at first, with long silences and careful conversations. But slowly, very slowly, something was growing. Not the mother-son relationship we had before. That had died and wasn't coming back. This was something new, something more honest. He told me about his divorce from Samantha, which had been brutal and public. She had fought for the house, for money she hadn't earned, using every manipulative tactic in her arsenal. But in the end, the truth had won. Michael kept the house, but he decided to sell it. "I can't live there," he told me at one of our coffees. "Every room has memories of how I treated you, of how I let her treat you." I didn't console him. That was his burden to carry, his lesson to learn. He told me how Samantha had tried to ruin him after the divorce, posting lies on social media, contacting his clients with fabricated stories. But the world already knew who she really was. The viral video had marked her permanently. Now she was working retail at a department store, an honest job, but a far cry from the luxury life she had planned. "I sometimes feel sorry for her," I admitted at one of our meetings. He looked at me, surprised. "How can you? After everything she did to you?" Because she built her entire life on lies and manipulation. And when that building collapsed, she had nothing real underneath. I did. I had real skills, real experience, real strength. She never developed anything of her own. That's a sad way to live. Michael had been going to therapy, something he told me shyly, as if expecting me to mock him, but I encouraged him. Good. We all need help processing our decisions. To understand why we do the things we do. He told me his therapist had helped him see patterns. How he had chosen Samantha because she was dominant and he wanted someone else to make decisions. How he had sacrificed his relationship with me because it was easier than confronting his wife. "I was a coward," he said at one of our last coffees. "Not just with you. In my whole life. I let other people decide for me, and then I was surprised when things went wrong. Awareness is the first step," I told him, "but it only matters if you use it to change." He nodded, taking my words seriously in a way he never had before. And then the invitation arrived. The biggest business event of the year. A gala recognizing the most outstanding entrepreneurs of the year. And I was nominated. Not just nominated. I was told I was the favorite to win in my category. Business reinvention. The gala would be at the most exclusive hotel in the city. 500 guests. Media coverage. The kind of event where careers are changed. I was given 3 guest tickets. I invited Arthur, of course. Without him, none of this would have been possible. I invited Julia, my constant rock through this whole journey. And after thinking about it for a long time, I offered the 3rd ticket to Michael. "You don't have to go," I told him. "I understand if it would be uncomfortable." He looked at me with shining eyes. "Mom, I wouldn't miss this for the world." The night of the gala was bright and cold. I wore a long champagne-colored gown that made me feel like royalty. I had let my hair grow out a bit, all silver gray now, no dye, and had it styled in an elegant updo. Simple but expensive jewelry I had bought for myself as a symbol of my success. When I arrived at the hotel with my team, the camera flashes surprised me. Reporters wanted interviews. "Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to be nominated? What advice do you have for women who want to reinvent themselves? Your story has inspired millions. What's next for you?" I answered every question with grace, feeling the confidence flow through my veins. This was my night. I had earned it. The ballroom was spectacular. Round tables with white linens and enormous floral centerpieces, an orchestra playing soft music, waiters circulating with champagne and appetizers. I sat at my table with Arthur, Julia, Michael, and some of my employees. They were all beaming, proud. During dinner, Michael leaned toward me. "Mom, there's something you need to know." His voice sounded nervous. My heart tightened. "Samantha is here. She managed to get an invitation somehow. She's at a table in the back. I just thought you should know before you saw her." I looked in the direction he indicated, and there she was. Samantha, in a black dress that had seen better days, sitting alone at a nearly empty table, scanning the room with a bitter expression. Our eyes met for a second. She looked small, diminished, as if all the venom she had carried inside had finally consumed her. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not triumph, just indifference. She no longer had any power over me. She was irrelevant to my story. I turned my back to her and continued my conversation with my table. Then it was time for the awards. Several categories were announced first: tech innovation, social entrepreneurship. Each winner went up to the stage to enthusiastic applause. And then my category arrived. The Business Reinvention Award recognizes an entrepreneur who has overcome significant adversity to build a successful business. This year, the nominees are. They read 3 names, including mine. My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. And the winner is Eleanor Thompson, founder of Silver Strategies Consulting. The room exploded in applause. My table leaped to their feet, cheering. Michael had tears rolling down his face. Arthur hugged me tightly. "You did it," he whispered. "I always knew you would." I walked to the stage, my legs trembling, but my head high. The award was a beautiful crystal plaque, heavy in my hands. I stood at the microphone, looking out at 500 people, on their feet, applauding. I scanned the crowd for Samantha. She was sitting, alone at her table, staring at me with an expression I can only describe as absolute defeat. And in that moment, I understood something profound. I hadn't won because she lost. I had won because I chose to build instead of destroy. Because when she tried to make me small, I chose to become enormous. Not for revenge, but for survival. Not to prove anything to her, but to prove everything to myself. "Thank you," I began, my voice firm and clear. "A year ago, someone told me that I had nothing. And that person was right. I had nothing, except a decision to make, to disappear or to flourish. I chose to flourish, and in the process I discovered that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. This award isn't just mine. It's for every woman who has been dismissed, underestimated, made invisible. It's for every person who has picked themselves up off the floor after being knocked down. It's for everyone who dares to start over when the world says it's too late. Thank you." The applause was deafening. I walked off the stage with my award, feeling its weight, not just the crystal, but what it represented. Validation, recognition, proof that I mattered. As I returned to my table, I passed by Samantha's. She was looking at me, her eyes filled with something that might have been regret, or maybe just envy. I paused for a second, and then I kept walking. Not with cruelty, simply with indifference. She was no longer part of my story. That night, after the gala ended, Michael walked me to the car. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I am so proud of you. And so sorry. I wish I could turn back time." "I wouldn't," I said honestly. "If I could turn back time, I would still be that small, invisible woman settling for crumbs, that night in your yard when Samantha humiliated me. It was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. It set me free. It forced me to see myself, and it gave me the anger I needed to transform." I looked at him, my son, this imperfect man I loved in spite of everything. "So, thank you. Tell Samantha," I said. "Thank you. Because without her cruelty, I never would have discovered my strength." He nodded, understanding. We hugged, a real hug, with forgiveness and hope woven in. That day, she thought she was destroying me, but it was the day I began, and this is only the beginning. You're not half the woman my mother is. were the words that came out of my daughter-in-law Victoria's mouth that night, just as I was serving the dessert I had made with so much love. Silence took over the dining room. My heart started to race, and without a second thought, I pushed my chair back and replied, "Then she can start paying your rent." My son Michael's face went completely pale. "Rent? What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever, and that this revelation would be just the beginning of a story nobody expected. My name is Carol. I am 70 years old, and that night I discovered that a mother's unconditional love can become her greatest weakness. For months, I had been secretly paying the $800 a month for the apartment where Michael and Victoria lived, believing it was my duty to help my son through his financial difficulties. I never imagined that while I was sacrificing my life savings, they saw me as a burden, as someone inferior whom they could humiliate without consequence. It had all started 6 months ago, when Michael came to my house with tears in his eyes, explaining that he had lost his job and they had no money for rent. "Mom, it'll just be for a few months until I find something," he had told me with that broken voice that completely disarmed me. Like any mother who loves her son, I didn't hesitate for a second. I took my savings, the ones I had saved penny by penny over years of working as a seamstress, and began paying their rent without Victoria knowing. "It's our secret," Michael had asked. "I don't want Victoria to feel bad about depending on you." How naive I was to believe he was doing it to protect his wife's pride, when in reality it was to protect his own image as a provider. While I was counting every dollar to help them, they were living as if nothing had changed, going out to dinner, buying new clothes, planning vacations I knew they couldn't afford. The dinner that night had been special. I had spent the whole day cooking his favorite dish, a roast chicken with mushroom gravy, rice pilaf, and that vanilla cheesecake he had loved so much since he was a little boy. The table was perfectly set, with the crystal goblets I had inherited from my mother and the good silver I only used on special occasions. Victoria arrived in an elegant red dress and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. From the moment they walked in, I noticed something different in the air. Victoria kept that forced smile I knew so well, the one she used when she was planning something unpleasant. Michael seemed nervous, avoiding my gaze, constantly fidgeting with his phone. During dinner, the conversation was tense. Victoria criticized everything: the temperature of the food, the decor of my house, even the scent of the air freshener I had put in the living room. "Carol, don't you think it's time you updated this place a little?" she had commented with that dismissive tone that bothered me so much. "My mother's house is so much more modern. She has that minimalist furniture that's in style now." I smiled tightly, trying to keep the peace, but inside I could feel the irritation starting to build. I had lived in that house for 30 years. Every object held a memory. Every corner told a story of my life. When it was time for dessert, I thought we could finally enjoy a pleasant moment. I had prepared the cheesecake with so much love, remembering how Michael would devour it as a child, how he used to tell me I was the best cook in the world. But instead of gratitude, what I received were those words that stabbed into my soul like thorns. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The impact of those words was like a slap across the face. I froze, the dessert spoon suspended in the air, feeling all the emotions welling up in my throat. Victoria looked at me with that cruel smile, as if she had been waiting all night for the perfect moment to hurt me. Michael lowered his head, avoiding my eyes, and in that instant, I understood that he already knew what his wife planned to say. "Excuse me?" I managed to articulate in a trembling voice, although deep down I knew I had heard her perfectly. Victoria leaned back in her chair with a false elegance, as if she owned my own home, and repeated the words with even greater cruelty. "You heard me, Carol. My mother is a successful, independent woman who built her own empire. She's never needed anyone. She has her company, her house on the beach, her trips to Europe. You? Well, all you know is how to cook and sew." Every word was like a hammer blow to my heart. I thought of all the years I had worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, sewing prom dresses, altering wedding suits, embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, while I never had the chance to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Michael was little and had a fever, how I sold my few pieces of jewelry to pay for his college education, how I worked double shifts so he could have everything he needed. "Victoria, please," Michael murmured weakly, but without enough force to truly defend me. Those 2 words were worse than silence because they confirmed that he agreed with his wife, that he had participated in this planned humiliation. My son, the same boy who once told me I was his hero, now allowed me to be treated like a servant in my own home. "No, Michael, let me finish," Victoria continued with that high-pitched voice she used when she wanted to sound superior. "Your mother needs to hear the truth. My mother would never have allowed her son to live like this, in this mediocrity." She made a dismissive gesture, pointing around my dining room, where there were so many beautiful memories. She would have helped us get something better, not kept us in poverty with her false kindness. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. It wasn't just the injustice of her words, but the absolute ingratitude of someone who had been living off my generosity without even knowing it. For 6 months, I had been the one paying for the roof over their haughty heads, the one who went without my arthritis medicine to make sure they had a comfortable place to live. I rose slowly from my chair, feeling the adrenaline course through my 70-year-old veins with a force I hadn't felt in years. "All right, Victoria," I said with a calm that surprised even myself. "If your mother is so superior, if she's so much better a woman than I am, then I think it's time she took on the responsibilities that such a successful woman should have." Michael looked at me, confused, but Victoria continued with that smug smile, as if she had won a battle. "Exactly, Carol. I'm glad you finally understand your place in this family." "Oh, I understand my place perfectly," I replied, feeling my voice grow firmer with each word. "And my place does not include continuing to pay the $800 a month for your apartment at 420 Maple Avenue, apartment 3B. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. Michael shot to his feet so abruptly he knocked over his water glass. "What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I had spoken in an alien language. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Victoria had completely lost her arrogant smile and was now looking at me with a mixture of terror and confusion that gave me immense satisfaction. "The rent I've been paying faithfully every month since February," I continued, savoring every second of their bewilderment. $800 that comes out of my bank account on the 5th of every month, plus the $100 extra for utilities that the landlord charges me for direct deposit. $900 in total that I pay so you two can live comfortably while you look down on me." Michael collapsed back into his chair as if his legs couldn't support him. "But you told me you had talked to the landlord, that he was giving you time to get the money," he stammered, his voice broken. Victoria was looking at him with a fury I had never seen before, as if he were responsible for ruining her moment of glory. "I lied," I admitted, without a hint of regret. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son, because I thought it was temporary, because I imagined that one day you would thank me for the sacrifice. But now I see that to you, I'm nothing more than a foolish old woman who deserves to be humiliated." Victoria tried to regain her composure, but her voice no longer had its previous arrogant confidence. "Carol, I didn't know you were. Michael never told me that." She began to stutter, but I cut her off by raising my hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses, dear. If your mother is as wonderful as you say, I'm sure she'll be delighted to take on this responsibility. After all, such a successful and independent woman would have no problem paying the rent for her daughter and son-in-law, right?" The irony in my voice was so thick that even Michael flinched when he heard it. The atmosphere in the dining room had become so tense it felt like the air itself had thickened. Victoria looked back and forth between Michael and me, as if she were rapidly calculating all the implications of what she had just discovered. Michael's hands were trembling, and he had started to sweat visibly. "Mom, why didn't you tell me the truth?" he finally asked, his voice broken. "Why did you let me believe you had worked out a deal with the landlord?" Michael's question echoed in the dining room like a painful cry. I looked at him intently, seeing in his eyes that mix of confusion and betrayal that broke my soul, but also feeling a rage that had been bottled up for far too long. "Why did I lie?" I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the thick air of the room. "I lied to you because you're my son, Michael. Because when you came to my house, crying, telling me you had lost everything, that you didn't even have money to buy food, I couldn't just stand by and watch the boy I raised, the man I love more than my own life, suffer." Victoria remained silent, but I could see her mind working quickly, trying to process the implications of this revelation. Her cheeks had lost that rosy color she always maintained with expensive makeup, and now she looked as pale as a sheet of paper. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since he was a child when he was nervous or scared. "I lied," I continued, my voice growing steadier, "because I thought it was temporary, because I believed that when you got back on your feet financially, when you found a stable job, you would thank me. I never imagined that while I was depriving myself of medicine for my arthritis, while I stopped buying meat to save those $900 a month, you two were planning how to humiliate me in my own home." Michael tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand to silence him. "No, now you're going to listen to me, Michael. For 6 months, I've been eating rice and eggs for dinner. I've been wearing the same pair of worn-out shoes because I didn't have the money to buy new ones. Do you know what I did last week? I sold your father's wedding ring, the ring I kept as my most precious treasure, so I could pay your rent and have some food in my refrigerator." Tears began to well up in my eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I sold the only physical memory I had of my husband, of the man who loved me for 30 years, to support a couple who considers me inferior, mediocre, unworthy of respect. Victoria finally found her voice, though it now sounded small and shaky. "Carol, I didn't know. Michael never told me you were paying." But I cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. "Of course you didn't know, dear. Because your husband preferred to lie to you too. He preferred for you to believe he had gotten the money on his own rather than admit he was depending on his mediocre mother." The word mediocre I pronounced with so much venom that Victoria visibly flinched. Michael finally exploded. "Mom, I never wanted it to be like this. You insisted on helping me. I didn't ask you to sacrifice so much." His voice sounded desperate, like a child caught in a lie. But his words only fueled my fury more. "I insisted?" I shouted, finally losing my composure. "You came to my house sobbing like a 5-year-old. You told me you didn't even have enough for bread, that Victoria was crying every night from the shame of not being able to pay the bills. What kind of mother would I have been if I had closed my door on you?" The silence that followed was devastating. Michael looked at Victoria with a reproachful expression that she returned with equal intensity. It was clear there were secrets and lies all around, that neither of them had been completely honest with the other. "You know what hurts the most, Michael," I continued, feeling the tears stream freely down my wrinkled cheeks. "It's not the money. It's not the sacrifices. It's that for all these months, every time you came to visit, I saw contempt in your eyes. Victoria criticized my house, my food, my clothes, my manners, without knowing it was my money paying for her roof. And you let her." Michael tried to approach me, but I took a step back. "Mom, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut him off sharply. "I just heard the explanation. Your wife believes I'm not half the woman her mother is. Fine. Then her mother can prove what kind of woman she is by taking care of her responsibilities." Victoria finally found some courage to speak, though her voice still trembled. "Carol, my words were. They were said in a moment of. I was upset about other things, and upset about other things." I interrupted with a bitter laugh. "You mean upset because you have to eat at the house of the woman who pays your rent? Upset because you have to feign cordiality with someone you consider so inferior?" The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Michael was pacing the dining room like a caged animal, while Victoria sat, twisting a napkin between her trembling hands. "Do you know what's saddest about all of this?" I continued, feeling a strange calm wash over me. "It's that I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Michael, I dreamed of having many children, of grandchildren running through this house, of family dinners filled with laughter and love. After years of trying to get pregnant, when you finally came along, I thought God had given me the greatest gift in the world." Michael stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "Mom, I love you. You know I love you. Love isn't just words, son. Love is actions, it's respect, it's protection. When your wife insults me and you stay silent, when you allow her to humiliate me in my own home, when you lie to me to hide that you're financially dependent on me, that's not love. That's convenience." Victoria shot to her feet, knocking over her chair. "That's enough. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this lecture. Michael, we're leaving. Now. Her voice had regained some of its characteristic arrogance, but I could see the panic in her eyes. No, Michael said firmly, surprising us both. We're not leaving until we sort this out. Mom, sit down, please. We need to talk like adults. But I had already made my decision. There's nothing more to talk about, Michael. The cards are on the table. Your wife has made it very clear what she thinks of me, and you've shown that you agree with her. Starting tomorrow, I will no longer pay your rent. If Victoria's mother is as superior as she claims, I'm sure she'll find a way to help you. But Mom, you can't do that, Michael yelled. And for the first time all night, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. We don't have the money. I got fired 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner. Michael's words fell upon the dining room like a bomb. You were fired 2 weeks ago, I repeated slowly, feeling a new wave of betrayal wash over my chest. And you didn't tell me anything? You let your wife humiliate me here, knowing that you are completely dependent on me. My voice broke on the last word, but not from sadness, from an indignation so deep that my hands were trembling. Victoria spun towards Michael, her eyes filled with fury. What? You were fired 2 weeks ago and you didn't say anything? I've been spending money as if everything was normal while you... She couldn't finish the sentence. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob in a way so dramatic she looked like a soap opera actress. Victoria, please, let me explain, Michael began, but she cut him off with a choked scream. Don't tell me to calm down. Just yesterday, I bought those $400 shoes. Last week, I booked the spa for my birthday. Michael, we're broke, and you let me spend like an idiot. Her tears had completely ruined her makeup, and now she looked exactly like what she was, a desperate and terrified woman. I watched this surreal scene from my position by the table, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. For months, I had been the one carrying the weight of supporting this couple, and now they were finally seeing the reality of their situation. Michael looked defeated, his shoulders slumped, and his face in his hands. You know what's most pathetic about all this, Michael? I said, with a calm that surprised me. That even now, even after discovering you've been lying to and humiliating me, my first instinct is to ask if you need help. That's what a mother does, son. That's what unconditional love does. Michael lifted his head to look at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. Mom, I lost the job because I was late 3 times in a row. Victoria had been sick, and I had to take care of her, take her to the doctor, and... Victoria interrupted him with a murderous look. I wasn't sick. I had appointments with the dermatologist for my beauty treatments. Don't use me as an excuse for your irresponsibility. The mask had completely fallen. The elegant, superior woman who had arrived at my house had vanished, revealing someone vulgar and desperate. Beauty treatments? I asked in disbelief. Are you telling me my son lost his job because he had to take you to beauty treatments? While I was selling my jewelry to pay for your roof, the laugh that escaped my throat was so bitter it scared even me. Michael approached me, his hands extended in a pleading gesture. Mom, please, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've failed you, but you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere to go. Victoria's parents are in Europe, and... But Victoria interrupted him again. My parents aren't in Europe. They're in the city. You told me to tell them we were fine so they wouldn't worry. Lie after lie was being peeled away like layers of a rotten onion, and each new revelation hit me like a slap. Then go to them, I said with a firmness I didn't know I possessed. Go to Victoria's parents, to that modern house with minimalist furniture, and the successful, independent mother. I'm sure they'll be delighted to welcome their daughter and her unemployed husband. Victoria stood up, swaying slightly, as if she'd been physically struck. I can't go to my parents. They don't know that Michael lost his previous job too. They think he's a manager at a construction company. Another lie. My son wasn't just a liar. He was a chronic liar who had built an entire life based on falsehoods. How many jobs have you lost, Michael? I asked, in a voice so low I could barely hear it. How many times have you lied to me? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael couldn't look me in the eye, and Victoria had started sobbing again. but this time more genuinely, as if she had finally grasped the magnitude of her situation. 3 jobs in the last 2 years, Michael finally admitted, his voice cracking. I always found excuses. I always told you it was temporary, that companies were downsizing. He stopped and looked at me with those eyes that were once my whole world. Mom, I have a problem. I think I have a real problem. For the first time all night, I felt something akin to compassion. My son wasn't just a liar, he was someone who needed professional help. But compassion didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't heal the wounds his words and his wife's had opened in my heart. Michael, I said slowly, recognizing you have a problem is the first step. But I can't keep being your safety net while you do nothing to change. I can't keep sacrificing my well-being to maintain a life built on lies. Victoria stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her red dress. This is ridiculous. Carol, you're his mother. Mothers don't abandon their children. My mother would never do this to me. The arrogance was back in her voice, like defensive armor. Your mother has never had to deal with this because you've never told her the truth, I replied with an icy calm. And you're right about one thing, Victoria. Mothers don't abandon their children. But I'm not abandoning my son. I'm stopping him from using me. Michael came over and took my hands in his. They were cold and trembling. Mom, I promise I'm going to change. I'll get help. I'll find a job. I'll do things right this time. Just give me one more chance. I looked at those hands that were once small, that I held when he learned to walk, when he was afraid of the dark, when he needed comfort after a nightmare. Michael, how many last chances have I given you? How many times have you made me the same promise? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the answer. I had lost count of the times we'd had this same conversation, of the broken promises, of the crushed hopes. The lease is up next month, I announced, gently pulling my hands from his. You have 30 days to find a solution. After that, I will no longer be responsible for your housing. Victoria stormed towards the door. Let's go, Michael. I'm not going to stay here and be humiliated by a woman who doesn't understand what family means, but Michael didn't move. Victoria, you go if you want. I need to talk to my mother. His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years, and for a moment, just for a moment, I saw a flash of the man he could have been. Victoria stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Michael's words. She turned slowly, and the expression on her face was a mixture of disbelief and pure fury. Are you asking me to leave? Me? After everything I've sacrificed for this marriage? Her voice had become high-pitched, almost hysterical, and she gestured with her hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Victoria, please, I need to fix this with my mom. Too much has happened tonight and… Michael tried to explain, but she cut him off with a scream that probably woke up the entire block. No, I'm not going anywhere. If you're going to grovel like a dog in front of your mother, you're going to do it with me present. She crossed her arms and planted herself firmly in the center of my dining room, like a statue of stubbornness. Besides, this conversation directly affects me. If she stops paying our rent, where are we going to live? A homeless shelter? I watched this scene with a mixture of fascination and horror. In a single night, I had seen the perfect facade this couple had built crumble, revealing the lies they had been weaving for months. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, terrible, but impossible to look away. Victoria, I finally said, I think you've said enough for one night. You've made it very clear what you think of me, and I've been equally clear about what I think of you two. There isn't much more to discuss. Yes, there is plenty more to discuss, she shouted, her face turning as red as her dress. You can't just ruin our lives because you were offended by a comment. Families forgive each other. Families support each other. The hypocrisy of her words hit me like a slap. Families support each other? I repeated slowly. You mean how you've supported me tonight? Or how Michael has supported me by lying about his employment situation? Or maybe you mean how you've supported me by letting me sacrifice my savings while you live as if nothing happened? Michael sat down heavily in one of the dining chairs, his head in his hands. Mom, I know we've made terrible mistakes. I know we've hurt you in unforgivable ways. But if you turn your back on us now, we literally have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I replied. and the words came out of my mouth with a hardness that surprised even me. For 70 years, I've been taking care of others. I took care of my parents until they died. I took care of your father during his illness. I've taken care of you since the day you were born. Do you know when the last time was that someone took care of me? When was the last time someone worried about my well-being? The silence that followed was deep and painful. Michael lifted his head and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a little boy, that mix of guilt and understanding that appeared when he finally understood he had done something very wrong. Never, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I've never worried about taking care of you. I always just assumed you'd be there, that you'd always be okay, that you'd always have the strength to solve everyone's problems. Victoria seemed to be losing patience with this emotional conversation. Enough with the melodrama. Carol, you're the mother. It's your responsibility to help your son. You can't just decide you don't want to be a mother anymore. Those words were the last straw. I walked up to Victoria until I was just inches from her face, and when I spoke, my voice was so low and threatening that she instinctively recoiled. Don't you ever, ever tell me what kind of mother I should be. I have been a mother for 35 years. I have sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my health, everything for my son. What have you sacrificed? Your beauty treatments? Your $400 shoes? Victoria tried to answer, but I continued without giving her a chance. Being a mother doesn't mean being a bottomless ATM. Being a mother doesn't mean accepting humiliation and disrespect. Being a mother means teaching your children to be responsible, independent, respectful people. And in that, clearly, I have failed. Michael shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. Don't say that. You've been a wonderful mother. I'm the problem. I'm the one who failed. Yes, Michael, you have failed. But I have also failed by letting this go on for so long, by allowing you to become a man who lies to his wife, who lies to his mother, who allows the woman who raised him to be humiliated. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice remained steady. Victoria had started pacing the dining room like a caged animal. This is a nightmare. This is a damn nightmare. Mothers-in-law are supposed to help their daughters-in-law. We're supposed to be a family. Family? I interrupted with a bitter laugh. When have you treated me like family, Victoria? When have you shown me respect, affection, consideration? From the day you met Michael, you've treated me like an obstacle, like an annoyance you have to tolerate to keep your husband happy. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not true? I asked, crossing my arms. Remember last Christmas, when you suggested it was better for you to spend the holidays alone because I didn't understand modern traditions? Remember when I offered to cook for your anniversary and you said you'd prefer something more sophisticated? Remember when you criticized me for wearing my favorite purple dress because women my age should wear more discreet colors? Each example I listed was like a small stab, and I could see Michael cringe with each memory. He had been present on all those occasions, had heard every hurtful comment, and had never said a word in my defense. Victoria, I continued, you never wanted to be part of this family. You wanted this family to disappear so you could have Michael all to yourself. Well, congratulations. It looks like you're going to get exactly what you wanted. Michael approached me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, please, give me a chance to fix this. I'll talk to Victoria. I'll get professional help. I'll find a job. I just need time. Time? I repeated softly. Michael, I've given you 35 years of time. I've given you chance after chance after chance. How much more time do you need to become the man you were supposed to be? Victoria had stopped pacing and was now watching us with a calculating expression. I could see her mind working, trying to find a new strategy, a new way to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Fine, she finally said with a strangely calm voice. If that's what you want, Carol, perfect. But don't come crying to us when you realize you've lost your only son forever. When you're all alone in this old house, surrounded by your musty memories, remembering that you had a family and you threw them out onto the street because of your stupid pride. Her words were designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty, to break my resolve. And for a moment, they almost worked. The image of being alone in this house, with no visitors, no phone calls, no one needing me, was terrifying. Victoria's words echoed in the dining room like a curse, designed precisely to attack my greatest fear, loneliness. For a moment, the picture she painted took hold of my mind. I saw myself in this empty house, without the laughter of grandchildren who never came, without Sunday phone calls, without anyone to remember my birthday. The silence stretched between us like a sticky web, and I could feel Michael watching me, waiting for my resolve to crumble. But then, something extraordinary happened. Instead of feeling panic or despair, I felt a deep, liberating calm. "You know what, Victoria?" I said slowly, savoring each word. "I would rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and humiliated. I prefer my musty memories of a happy marriage and years of honest work over creating new memories of lies and disrespect." Victoria blinked several times, as if she hadn't expected that response. Michael's jaw dropped, and I could see him slowly processing that his final card of emotional blackmail had completely failed. "Besides," I continued, feeling a new energy course through my veins, "I'm not going to be as lonely as you think. Just yesterday, I got a phone call that changed everything, but you two were so busy planning how to humiliate me tonight that I didn't tell you. Stephen Herrera called me." The name dropped into the dining room like a nuclear bomb. Michael froze, and for the first time all night, Victoria was completely speechless. Stephen had been my boyfriend during my college years, the man I had planned to marry before I met Michael's father. He was an ambitious, intelligent man who had decided to move to the United States to seek better opportunities when I chose to stay and start a family. "Stephen Herrera?" Michael mumbled, his voice cracking. "The Stephen from the photos? Your college boyfriend?" I nodded slowly, enjoying the look of absolute shock on their faces. "The very one." It turns out that after 40 years of building an engineering firm in California, after raising 3 successful children and losing his wife 2 years ago, he decided to look up his old friends. He found me through social media, and we've been talking on the phone for the past 2 weeks. Victoria finally found her voice, though it sounded strangled. "What do you mean you've been talking?" Her face had taken on a greenish hue that was not at all flattering. "I mean exactly that. We've been talking every day, remembering old times, telling each other about our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams. And last night he made me an offer that took my breath away." Michael approached me with hesitant steps. "What kind of offer, Mom?" I smiled for the first time all night, a genuine smile that came from the depths of my heart. He invited me to spend a month at his house in San Diego. He says he wants to show me California. He wants me to meet his kids, that he's always wondered what would have happened if— I left the sentence hanging, enjoying the absolute silence that had taken over the dining room. "But, Mom," Michael stammered, "you can't just go off with a man you haven't seen in 40 years. What if he's a con artist? What if he's lying to you? What if— What, Michael?" I interrupted with a firmness that surprised me. "What if he turns out to be a liar like you? What if he uses me like you have? At least with Stephen, I'll be having an adventure, seeing new places, being valued for who I am, not for what I can give financially." Victoria had collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. You can't be serious about going away with a stranger. Stephen is not a stranger to me. He knows my dreams, my fears, my hopes, because we shared them when we were young. He knows I always wanted to travel, that I always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean, that I always dreamed of writing a book about my experiences as a seamstress. Do you know what the first thing he said to me when he called was? 'Carol, I hope you chased all your dreams because you deserved an extraordinary life.' Tears began to run down my cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. When was the last time either of you asked me about my dreams? When was the last time you cared if I was happy, if I had plans, if there was anything I wanted to do with my life?" Michael tried to approach me, but I held up my hand to stop him. Stephen sent me pictures of his house, of his garden full of orange and yellow flowers, of the ocean view from his deck. He told me about his trips to Europe, about the books he's read, about the dinners he cooks for his friends every Friday. And you know what else he told me? Victoria lifted her head to look at me, her eyes red and filled with resentment. "What did he tell you?" "He told me that a woman of my age and experience is a treasure, that I have stories to tell, wisdom to share, love to give. He told me that any man would be lucky to have my company, my conversation, my affection. My voice broke slightly as I recalled those words, which had healed wounds I didn't even know I had. After I hung up that call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for an hour. But I didn't cry from sadness, I cried from relief. I cried because someone had finally reminded me that I am more than a mother, more than a provider, more than a free maid. I am a woman with her own worth. Michael had turned ashen. "Mom, please, don't make any rash decisions because of what happened tonight. Stephen could just be telling you what you want to hear. Scammers are very skilled. Enough," I shouted with a force that surprised even me. "Enough trying to control my life. Enough telling me what I can and cannot do. For 35 years, I have lived for you. I have made every decision thinking about your well-being, your future, your happiness. For the first time in decades, I am going to make a decision thinking about myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael had slumped into a chair, his head in his hands, sobbing like a small child. Victoria was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and terror, as if she had seen a ghost. "You know what else Stephen told me?" I continued, feeling my confidence grow with each word. "He told me he had kept a picture of me from when we were 20, the one where I'm wearing the white dress with red flowers that I had sewn myself. He said that all these years, especially after his wife died, he would look at that photo and wonder if I had been happy, if I had managed to fulfill my dreams." Michael lifted his head, his eyes swollen from crying. "And what did you tell him?" I told him the truth, that I had had moments of happiness, especially when you were little, when your father was alive, when I thought I was building something beautiful called a family. But I also told him that I had sacrificed so much of myself in the process that I no longer remembered who Carol was before she was Michael's mother or Frank's widow. Victoria shot to her feet as if stung by a bee. "This is ridiculous. You can't leave with that man. What will people say? A woman your age chasing romantic adventures like a teenager." I looked her directly in the eye and smiled with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. "Victoria, dear, after tonight, what people think is the last thing I'm worried about. After all, if my own family considers me inferior and mediocre, what does the opinion of strangers matter?" Michael finally found the strength to speak. "Mom, if you really want to meet Stephen, if you really want to travel, we could support you. But don't do it out of spite. Don't ruin your life just to punish us." "Ruin my life?" I repeated in disbelief. "Michael, don't you understand? This isn't a decision made out of spite. This is a decision of survival. For the first time in decades, someone is offering me a chance to be happy, to be valued, to be loved for who I am, not for what I can provide." I walked to my dining room window and looked out at the street where I had lived for so many years, where I had raised my son, where I had buried so many dreams. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Stephen and I'm going to accept his invitation. I'm going to buy a plane ticket. I'm going to pack a suitcase with my best dresses, and I'm going to find out if it's still possible to be happy at 70 years old. The weeks following that dinner were the strangest of my life. Michael tried to call me every day for the first week, leaving desperate messages on my answering machine, pleading with me to reconsider my decision, not to go with Stephen, to give him another chance. Victoria, on the other hand, didn't bother to contact me once, which was both painful and liberating. At least I knew exactly where I stood with her. Stephen and I talked every night on the phone, conversations that stretched for hours, just like when we were young. He told me about his life in San Diego, about his work as a civil engineer, about the projects he had built across California. I told him about my years of sewing, about the wedding dresses I had created, about the stories each client had shared with me. It was strange and wonderful to feel interesting again, to feel that someone valued my experiences and my memories. "Carol," he had said during one of our late-night calls, "I've thought about you for 40 years. When I married Margaret, when my kids were born, when I built my company, there was always a part of me that wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to come with me to America." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. "Stephen, I thought about you many times too, especially when things got tough, when his father was sick, when Michael started having problems. I wondered what my life would have been like if I had gotten on that plane with you. Well, he had replied with that deep laugh I remembered perfectly. It's never too late to find out, is it? The plane ticket sat on my nightstand, real and tangible like a promise of freedom. Departure, March 15th. Destination, San Diego, California. Stephen had insisted on paying for the ticket, but I had refused his offer. This is my decision, my adventure, I had told him. I want to pay for it with my own money. The money I had saved for months by skimping on medicine and decent food, money I would now use for something that would make me happy for the first time in years. 3 days before my trip, Michael showed up at my door. He looked terrible gaunt, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled as if he'd slept in them. "Mom, please, we need to talk," he said in a broken voice that broke my heart despite everything that had happened. I let him in but kept my emotional distance. "Where's Victoria?" I asked as I made coffee in my small kitchen. "At her parents' house," he replied, sitting heavily in my kitchen chair. "She left a week ago. Says she can't be with me if I don't have a job, if I can't keep her in the lifestyle she deserves." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out her superior mother isn't so superior when it comes to helping out financially. They told her to figure it out on her own." I felt a pang of satisfaction that wasn't particularly noble, but one I couldn't help. "And what are you going to do now?" "I've been desperately looking for a job. I've applied everywhere. Offices, restaurants, stores, construction, anything. I'm willing to do anything." He lifted his head to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine humility. "I've also started going to therapy. I found a community center that offers free services." "I'm glad to hear that, Michael," I said, and I meant it. That's an important step. The therapist helped me understand a lot of things about myself I didn't want to see. He helped me understand that I've been an emotional and financial parasite, not just with you, but with everyone who has tried to help me. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he'd practiced this speech many times in front of the mirror. "And what have you learned specifically?" I asked, curious to see if there had really been a change or if this was just another manipulation. Michael took a moment to answer, nervously fiddling with his coffee cup. "I've learned that I never learned to be responsible because you were always there to rescue me." "It's not your fault," he added quickly when he saw my expression. "It's mine." But the pattern was set very early on, and I never made the effort to break it. I nodded slowly. "And Victoria? What did you learn about your relationship with her?" "That it wasn't love I felt for her. It was emotional dependency. I liked that she was demanding and critical because it gave me excuses not to grow, to remain a child who needed his mom to rescue him." He paused and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've destroyed our relationship. But I need you to know that for the first time in my adult life, I'm seeing things clearly." "And what exactly do you see?" I asked carefully. "I see a 70-year-old woman who sacrificed her entire life for a son who never thanked her for it. I see a woman who worked her hands to the bone to give me an education and opportunities that I squandered. I see a woman who deserves to be happy, who deserves to be valued, who deserves to chase her own dreams after decades of chasing mine." His words moved me, but they also made me cautious. "Michael, I'm glad to hear you're reflecting on these things. But words are easy. Real change takes time and consistent action." "I know," he said, nodding vigorously. "And I'm not here to ask you to cancel your trip. I'm not here to ask for money or help. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to prove with actions that I can change, even if you're no longer here to see it." "What do you mean by that?" Michael got up and started pacing my small kitchen. "I got a job with a cleaning company. It's night work, pays little, but it's honest, and it allows me to live in a small room I rented near downtown. I'm also taking online classes to get a certification in accounting." I looked at him with genuine surprise. "When did you decide to do all this?" "The night after our dinner. When I got home and Victoria started screaming at me for ruining our financial situation. Something inside me just snapped. I realized I was 35 years old and had never been responsible for my own life for a single day." He sat down again and took my hands in his. "Mom, I want you to go to California. I want you to meet Stephen, to see the ocean, to write that book you've always wanted to write. I want you to be happy, even if it means I'm no longer a part of your life." For the first time since the night of the dinner, I felt like I was talking to my real son, not the manipulative, dependent version I had known for so many years. Michael, you will always be a part of my life. You are my son, and you always will be. But you need to understand that our relationship can't stay the same. I understand completely, he said firmly. And I want you to know that I'm going to work on becoming the kind of son you can be proud of, even if it takes years, even if by then it's too late to repair our relationship. We sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Michael spoke again. Would you tell me about Stephen? What was he like when you were young? An involuntary smile spread across my face. He was brilliant, ambitious, gentle. He had this way of making me feel like the most interesting woman in the world. When we talked, he would focus completely on me, as if my words were the most important thing he had ever heard. Why didn't you go with him when he left for the States? Because I was scared, I admitted. Scared of leaving everything I knew, scared of failing, scared of not being good enough for him. And then I met your father, and he represented security, stability, a predictable life. I paused. I don't regret choosing your father. He was a good man, and we had beautiful moments. But now I have a second chance to find out what would have happened if I had been braver. Michael nodded slowly. Do you think Stephen has really thought about you all these years? Or do you think he's idealizing the past? Michael's question made me think deeply. You know, Michael, I've asked myself that same question every night since Stephen contacted me. Is what he feels real? Or are we two older people idealizing a youthful love? I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I had planted roses so many years ago. But then I realize it doesn't matter. How can it not matter? Michael asked with genuine curiosity. It doesn't matter if what we feel is nostalgia, idealization, or true love. What matters is that, for the first time in decades, I feel alive, I feel valuable, I feel like a woman who deserves to be courted, admired, and respected. I turned to look at him. When was the last time I felt like that? When was the last time someone made me feel special just for being myself? Michael lowered his head, ashamed. I never made you feel that way, did I? I always took you for granted, as something that would always be available no matter how I treated you. Exactly. And not just you, Michael. Your father, too, towards the end of our marriage, started to see me only as the woman who cooked, cleaned, and took care of him when he was sick. I stopped being Carol and became just Frank's wife, and then Michael's mother. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Stephen, calling at the time we had agreed upon, as always. I looked at Michael, who nodded for me to answer. Hello, beautiful. Stephen's voice came through the phone, and I immediately felt that familiar warmth spreading through my chest. How was your day? Interesting, I replied, smiling despite the tension. My son is here. Michael, would you like to say hello to Stephen? Michael froze for a moment, but then nodded slowly. I put the phone on speaker. Stephen, this is Michael, my son. Michael, this is Stephen Herrera. Hello, Michael, Stephen said with a warm voice and no trace of awkwardness. Your mother has told me a lot about you. It must be difficult for you that your mom is planning this trip. Michael cleared his throat nervously. Yes, sir, it's complicated. But I'm starting to understand that my mother deserves to be happy, even if it means big changes in our lives. What a mature response, Stephen replied with approval. I'll tell you something, Michael. I have 3 children, all adults, and it took them years to understand that their parents are whole people with their own needs and desires, not just eternal providers of support and resources. Michael looked at me with surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected Stephen to be so direct, yet so understanding. Mr. Herrera, Michael continued, may I ask what your intentions are with my mother? Stephen chuckled softly. That's a fair question. My intentions are to get to know the woman that the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. My intentions are to show her beautiful places, introduce her to my children, cook for her, listen to her stories, and perhaps, if we both decide we want to, build a deep friendship or something more. And what if things don't work out as you expect? Michael asked. Then we will have had a beautiful adventure. We will have closed a chapter that was left open for decades, and your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in California. There's no pressure, Michael. No unrealistic expectations. Just two older people giving themselves a chance to rediscover joy. Michael visibly relaxed. Thank you for being so honest, sir. Call me Stephen, please. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment. Michael nodded and went into the living room, giving me privacy for my phone call. How do you feel after talking to him? I asked Stephen once we were alone. I feel good. He seems to be a young man going through a period of growth. That speaks well of how you raised him, Carol. Children who never face difficulties never learn to be resilient. His words reassured me more than I expected. Stephen, are you sure you want to involve a woman with so much family drama in your quiet life? Carol, dear, we all have family drama at our age. One of my sons got divorced last year and moved back into my house with his two young children. My daughter is going through a midlife crisis and calls crying every Tuesday. My youngest son is battling a video game addiction that's affecting his marriage. He laughed softly. Family drama is part of life. The difference is how we handle it. And how do you handle it? With clear boundaries, with tough love, and by always remembering that my children are adults responsible for their own decisions and consequences. Something it seems you are learning to do as well. After hanging up with Stephen, Michael and I continued talking late into the night. He told me more details about his therapy, about how he was learning to identify behavioral patterns he had repeated for years without realizing it. Do you know what was the hardest thing to accept in therapy? He asked me as we drank a second cup of coffee. What's that? That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature. It was that I had developed an emotional addiction to being rescued. Every time someone solved a problem for me, every time they gave me money or got me out of a jam, I felt a kind of euphoric relief. It was like a drug. His words struck me deeply. And how are you supposed to break that addiction? By facing the consequences of my actions without seeking a rescue. When I lost the last job, my first instinct was to come running to you with a sad story. But this time, instead, I slept in my car for 3 days until I got the cleaning job. You slept in your car? I asked with automatic motherly concern. Yes. And it was one of the most important experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net, what it means for my actions to have real consequences. He looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, during those 3 nights, I thought a lot about you. I thought about all the times you had to choose between your needs and mine, and you had always chosen mine. That's what mothers do, Michael. No, Mom. That's what mothers who haven't learned to set healthy boundaries do. And that's what sons who have never learned to be responsible adults do. He leaned forward. The therapist helped me understand that by constantly rescuing me, you were unintentionally depriving me of the opportunity to grow. His words hurt, but they also freed me. For years, I had felt guilty every time I considered saying no to Michael. Every time I thought about putting my own needs first. Now I understood that my generosity had actually been a way of controlling him, of keeping him dependent on me. So what happens now? I asked softly. Now I'm going to prove, first to myself and then to you, that I can be a responsible adult. I'm going to pay my own bills, make my own decisions, face my own problems. And when you come back from California, if you decide to come back, I'm going to be a son you can be proud of. And if I decide to stay in California? Michael smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine joy in his smile instead of manipulation. Then I'm going to be happy for you. I'll visit when I can. I'll call you every week, and I'll live my own life knowing that my mother is finally living hers. The day of my departure dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of adventures to come. Michael arrived early to take me to the airport, and for the first time in years, there was no tension between us. He had brought flowers, a small bouquet of white daisies he knew were my favorite, and a sealed letter. Don't open it until you're on the plane, he said with a shy smile. It's something I needed to tell you, but it's easier for me to write than to say. During the drive to the airport, we talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, his plans for the week. It was a normal conversation between a mother and son, something we hadn't had in years. There were no pleas, no drama, no attempts at emotional manipulation. Just a quiet conversation between two adults who love each other but finally understand healthy boundaries. Mom, he said when we got to the airport, I want you to know that no matter what happens in California, this was already worth it. What do you mean? Seeing you like this, seeing you excited, nervous, happy. I haven't seen you shine like this in years. He helped me get my suitcase out of the car, a suitcase I had carefully packed with my best dresses, including a new coral pink one I had bought especially for this trip. At the airport, Michael walked me to the security gate. When it was time to say goodbye, we hugged with an intensity we hadn't shared since he was a little boy. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Have fun, fall in love, be happy. You deserve it more than anyone in the world. I love you too, son, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Once on the plane, I opened Michael's letter with trembling hands. His handwriting, which had always been sloppy, looked more mature, more careful. "Mom, these past few days I've been thinking about all the times you were heroic without me even noticing. When you worked double shifts to pay for my school books. When you sold your new sewing machine to buy me a bicycle. When you pretended not to be hungry so I could have more to eat. When you stayed up all night taking care of me when I was sick. All those moments of silent love that I took for granted. Now I understand that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means loving enough to teach independence. It means being brave enough to let go when it's time. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow. Fly high, Mom, literally and figuratively. With all my love and respect, Michael. P.S. Stephen is lucky to know the most extraordinary woman in the world. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I put the letter in my purse. Through the airplane window, I could see the clouds stretching out infinitely, and for the first time in decades, I felt that my future was just as infinite. Stephen was waiting for me at the San Diego airport with a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile I recognized immediately, even though it had more wrinkles and his hair was completely white. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same joy I remembered from our college days. "Carol," he said as we hugged, "you're even more beautiful than I remembered." The days that followed were like living in a dream. Stephen took me to see the Pacific coast, where for the first time in my life, I saw the ocean stretching to the horizon. He introduced me to his children, who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply. His youngest daughter, Carmen, told me, "Dad hasn't smiled like this since Mom died. Thank you for bringing the joy back to him." Stephen cooked for me every night. Elaborate dinners we savored on his deck while watching the sunset. We talked for hours about our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams, our fears and hopes. It was as if the 40 years that had passed vanished when we were together. "Do you know what I like most about being with you?" he asked one night as we walked along the beach. "What's that?" "That when I'm with you, I'm not Margaret's widower. I'm not the worried father of 3 adult children. I'm not the retired engineer. I'm just Stephen, the man who fell in love with a brilliant girl 40 years ago and never forgot her." His words reached my soul because they expressed exactly how I felt. With him, I wasn't Michael's long-suffering mother. I wasn't Frank's widow. I wasn't the tired seamstress. I was just Carol, a woman with stories to tell, dreams to chase, and love to give. At the end of my month in California, Stephen made me a proposal that changed my perspective on what was possible at 70. "Carol, I don't want this to end. I know it's crazy. I know we're just getting to know each other again after so many years, but I want you to consider moving to California. Not to get married right away, not to live together if you don't want to, but to give ourselves the chance to build something beautiful in this stage of our lives." My first instinct was to think of all the reasons why it was impossible. My house, my few friends, my life back home. But then I thought of Michael, of his letter, of his words about flying high. I thought of Victoria, who had likely never respected me. I thought of all the years I had lived for others, postponing my own dreams. "And what if things don't work out?" I asked. "Then we'll have had a beautiful adventure. But, Carol, what if they do? What if after a lifetime of putting others first, you finally get the chance to be completely happy?" That night, I called Michael to tell him about Stephen's proposal. His response surprised me and filled me with pride. "Mom, are you happy with him?" "Happier than I've been in decades." "Does he treat you well? Does he respect you? Does he make you feel valued?" "Every day, then stay. Build the life you deserve. I'm going to be okay. In fact, I'll be better knowing that you're finally living for yourself." 6 months later, I was packing my most cherished belongings, preparing to move permanently to California. Michael helped me with the entire process, demonstrating a maturity and responsibility that filled me with hope for his future. "You know what's the most ironic part of all this?" he said as we packed family photos. "What's that?" "That by letting you go, I feel like I'm finally getting you back. Not as the mother who constantly rescues me, but as the extraordinary woman you always were, but who I never bothered to truly know." As I write this story from Stephen's deck, watching the Pacific Ocean and waiting for him to return from the market where he's gone to buy ingredients for the dinner we'll cook together, I reflect on everything that has changed. Michael is successfully building his own life. He got a promotion at work, moved into a better apartment, and is dating a woman who challenges him to be a better person instead of enabling his dependency. Victoria, he told me, married an older man who can support her lifestyle, which is probably for the best for everyone. And I finally learned that it's never too late to be happy. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness, but the foundation for loving others in a healthy way. I learned that a 70-year-old woman can have adventures, can fall in love, can start over. Stephen and I got married last month in a small ceremony on the beach, with his children and Michael as witnesses. Michael cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy. "I never thought I'd see my mother marry for love," he told me afterward. "I always assumed your marriage to Dad was just for convenience and family. Now, when I look back at that terrible night when Victoria humiliated me in my own home, I see it as the greatest gift I could have ever received. Because it was that humiliation that finally woke me up, that showed me I deserved more, that gave me the courage to pursue the happiness I thought I had lost forever. And you? What would you do if life gave you a second chance to be completely happy? Would you have the courage to take it, no matter what others think? Because, believe me, it's never too late to start over."